David Lynch and Isabella Rossellini. At the end of the 20th century, their names became synonymous with mystery and controversy. Some considered their romantic union to be a clever hoax, while others saw it as one of the most exciting love stories of our time. Only they knew what really happened between them, but both remained silent. This silence continued even after they broke up. The story of their love, full of innuendo and secrets, was pieced together by those around them from accidentally dropped phrases, sudden revelations, unusual actions, and things left unsaid, which only fueled the legend. Film director David Lynch and actress Isabella Rossellini seem to have started a game that turned conventional ideas about romantic relationships upside down. Their hobbies only emphasized this extraordinary nature. Isabella preferred fortune-telling with cards, seeking to unravel the future, while Lynch was deeply immersed in the world of spiritualism, psychoanalysis, and esoteric Native American teachings. Lynch's particular obsession was the desire to learn how to move in a space where time loses its power. Later, this idea would find its embodiment in his cult series Twin Peaks, where he came up with the concept of the mysterious black and white lodges, places that exist outside of ordinary reality. Their first meeting happened completely by chance, at a shared table in a New York restaurant. However, it was not so much Isabella's appearance that caught Lynch's attention as her bright red dress, which, it seemed to him, had a life of its own. For Lynch, a master of symbols, the color palette always had a deep meaning. Without further explanation, he said to her, "Red is drugs," leaving the phrase hanging in the air without any explanation. Instead of explaining, Lynch continued to delve into his philosophical musings. He deeply believed in the power of dreams, and that each of us is much more complex and multifaceted than we appear at first glance. He believed that one only needed to find a special point of view from which everyday actions would lose their mundane meaning and acquire a deep, symbolic meaning. He also added that he sensed a certain wickedness in Isabella, which she herself always considered innocent curiosity. Their conversation dragged on, and they quickly realized that they had a lot in common. Lynch had a strong fatalism, a quality that, according to him, he inherited from one of his great-grandmothers, who had ancient Mayan blood running through her veins, which gave his beliefs a mystical tinge. Isabella liked the strange, almost cryptic speech of the man sitting opposite her. Apparently, he had no desire to flirt with her in the usual sense of the word. Isabella, trying to guess his interests, suggested, "You must be interested in horoscopes." Lynch replied laconically, "You guessed right." As they were leaving the restaurant, a large white dog suddenly crossed their path. The dog walked straight up to Lynch, rubbed against his legs, and calmly walked on. Isabella, surprised by the animal's behavior, asked, "Is that your dog? Do you know her?" Lynch replied, "No. This is our destiny." Isabella wanted to respond in a similar, humorous, or philosophical vein, but suddenly realized that Lynch was talking to himself, immersed in his own inner world, as if unaware of her presence. Later, recalling her first impressions of David, Isabella described him as a good boy with the makings of a maniac, an image that perfectly matched his film work. Lynch, meanwhile, was fascinated by Isabella's mouth, noticing something special about it. What a combination of firm, snow-white teeth and soft, delicate lips. Isabella had only read about something similar, with elements of contrast and hidden sensuality, in the works of the Marquis de Sade. Lynch also noticed a detail that virtually no one else in the audience noticed. Part of Isabella's front tooth was chipped, the result of a childhood scuffle with one of her brothers. This minor imperfection probably only added to its strange charm. Lynch did not attach much importance to his chance encounter with Isabella. However, a week later, his gaze happened to fall on a copy of Screen World magazine with a photo of his new acquaintance, who had appeared in one of the Taviani brothers' films. From the article, he learned that Isabella was the daughter of legendary film classic Roberto Rossellini and famous actress Ingrid Bergman. That same day, realizing her background and talent, he brought her the screenplay for his new film, Blue Velvet. Isabella immediately liked the proposed role of Dorothy, a singer with sadomasochistic tendencies. What she was going to play turned out to be close to her on an intuitive level. Her character's depressed state, her feeling of inexplicable fear, all this was familiar to her from her own experience. During filming, Lynch, striving for maximum realism and drama, demanded that she attack Kyle MacLachlan, who played her casual lover and who would later play Inspector Cooper in Twin Peaks, with a knife and scream. Lynch gave Isabella clear instructions. You hate men subconsciously. Take revenge on Kyle for being a man. Much later, the actress recalled that her own traumatic experience helped her empathize with Dorothy's role. Once, I was severely beaten by a man. Now I can't even remember all the details of that incident. I only remember waking up on the pavement late at night, alone. Strangely, the strongest feeling at that moment was an inexplicable sense of my own guilt. And since then, the white dog from that encounter in the restaurant has never left her mind, taking on an ominous, mystical meaning. Interestingly, Lynch, when offering Isabella the role of Dorothy, did not yet know this tragic story from her life. She told him later, when they became truly close. David then replied with remarkable insight, I guessed that when I looked at your lips. In response, he told her the tragic story of his first marriage. From his first wife, whom he had long since separated from, he had a daughter, Jennifer, who was paralyzed from the waist down. He drew a parallel with Lynch's early film Eraserhead, in which the main character has a child born without arms or legs. He denied any subconscious coincidence, claiming that even as a child, he had understood one simple truth. If you want to surprise people, tell them what you only say to yourself in your dreams. All my films are first and foremost about me and my destiny. They are very personal, Lynch said, emphasizing the autobiographical nature of his work. Critics often accused Lynch's films of being somewhat morbid and excessively gloomy. After her first meeting with David, Isabella came to a conclusion which she shared with her friend. Lynch is a horror movie, but I like him. This simple phrase concealed a deep understanding of his unusual nature. Perhaps Isabella guessed that, had her life turned out differently, she too could have created terrible art from her own life, transforming pain and trauma into creativity, just like David. The only thing she could never understand about Lynch was his unexpected, inexplicable silence, into which he would sometimes plunge right in the middle of a conversation with her, as if disconnecting from the outside world. Isabella tried to find out from the studio secretary where Blue Velvet was being filmed, whether this happened to David with anyone else. The secretary just shyly avoided answering. Once, Isabella herself fell silent and remained silent for an entire hour. Lynch sat opposite her and listened to her silence with unwavering attention, but his gaze suggested that he was somewhere far away, in his own thoughts and worlds. At first, Isabella found it romantic, adding another layer of mystery to their relationship. They got to know each other better on the set, where the boundaries between reality and fiction were blurred. Isabella herself had no idea what she was getting herself into. Her partner, Dennis Hopper, following Lynch's instructions, seriously hurt her in one of the violent scenes. And when she tried to scream, he covered her mouth with a piece of blue velvet, cutting it right off the hem of her robe. Lynch, sitting on a chair with his face covered by his hands, peered at them as if through cracks in a fence, watching what was happening with a certain detached, almost clinical interest. This was very unpleasant for Isabella. Out of hurt and pain, she screamed wildly. "Just what we need, baby," whispered Dennis Hopper, one of the most famous maniacs of American cinema, satisfied with the result. It turned out that David, without warning her, had included this cruel scene in the script, seeking maximum psychological impact. The symbolism of blue velvet remained a mystery to Isabella. When she asked Lynch about it, he replied that he himself did not know what the color blue meant, adding, "It's better for no one to know," hinting at something deeper and more disturbing. Once, right in the studio, Lynch gave Isabella a toy, a fluffy white dog. "Feed it," he said. "Remember, we met it when we were leaving the restaurant?" This little dog became a kind of talisman for their strange relationship, and every time Isabella looked into the dog's eyes, they seemed alive to her, as if they contained a part of that very fateful dog. After filming, when they were alone, they continued their strange game, telling each other the most terrible and candid details of their own lives. It was a kind of psychotherapy session, where the boundaries between personal secrets and art were blurred. Isabella, perhaps unaware of the consequences, shared this with one of her friends, who was the first to spread the rumor that David and Isabella were crazy, surrounding them with an aura of madness and eccentricity. Their sudden romance was quickly surrounded by rumors and scandals, attracting the attention of the press. "You know, the newspapers write that I do everything with you that happens in my movie," Lynch said, noting the public's reaction with some satisfaction. "That's not so far from the truth," Isabella remarked, emphasizing how their reality was intertwined with Lynch's artistic fiction. Often, after long and emotionally exhausting candid conversations, Lynch would go off to meditate, immersing himself in his inner world. Isabella would sit next to him and watch him silently. He, as if reading her thoughts, would say to her, "I do whatever I want with you mentally." Soon, this phrase, taken out of its intimate context, became public knowledge, further fueling rumors about their strange relationship. Every morning, David began with the same question to Isabella: "Why am I alive?" And she invariably replied, "To scare people," which was the perfect answer for an artist whose work was designed to shock and evoke deep emotions. David opened up a whole world of strange, almost otherworldly sensations of beauty to Isabella. He had an intuitive, mystical sense of beauty that differed from the conventional. Once, he gave her an insanely expensive antique vase for her birthday, which they celebrated together for the first time. Isabella was delighted like a child, admiring its perfection. But David walked over to the vase, took a hammer, and with one decisive blow chipped off the edge of the antique vessel. "It's more beautiful this way," Lynch told her, demonstrating his philosophy that imperfection and destruction can give things a special, profound beauty. He found the most unusual things beautiful: a cracked glass, an oil stain on the asphalt, or even human skin. "Is there anything more beautiful?" David would say to Isabella. He believed that only smoke rising to the sky or telegraph wires could compare to human skin in beauty. He was always fascinated by the contrasts around him: oil and cement, or a factory on the seashore. In his opinion, The sea itself, without human intervention, was uninteresting. Only human intervention, its traces, made nature beautiful. Imagine, for example, an oil refinery in the desert, he suggested, seeing a special aesthetic in it. However, looking at Isabella Rossellini, isn't it clear that your ideal of female beauty still corresponds to the generally accepted one? Lynch was asked once. He replied with his characteristic mystery. Each of us has the ability to see the beauty of things in their contrast with each other. I am no exception here, confirming that even he is subject to certain aesthetic standards, but perceives them through the prism of his unique views. Lynch and Isabella were not legally married. Their relationship was free of formalities. They simply lived together, as lovers should, and ran a joint household, as husband and wife should. Isabella thought it would last forever. But Lynch didn't want that. "It's too much like your family," he grumbled, hinting at the similarity between their couple and Isabella's parents. He was a famous director. She was a famous actress. Many myths were also spun about the happy romance between Isabella's mother and father. But her father never spoke publicly about his happiness, while David, on the contrary, spoke about it, putting their relationship on public display. Isabella probably wanted to marry Lynch, which she had thought about many times. However, something that appeared in their home along with Lynch's meditations prevented her from fulfilling this desire. In the first 6 months of their romance, when her emotional influence on Lynch was at its strongest, his film plots became even darker than usual, perhaps reflecting internal conflicts and transformations. The end of the game. Farewell to the sorcerer. In the midst of filming Blue Velvet, Isabella began to have nightmares in which Lynch ran away from home, disappearing and leaving her alone. One night, she woke up and was horrified to discover that David was not there. She screamed and immediately saw David's reflection in the mirror, as if his spirit had left his body. Isabella fainted from shock. Morning came. Lynch was sleeping nearby, as if nothing had happened. She told him about her nightmare. He just shrugged and, seemingly out of politeness, asked, "Did I say something to you?" "No," Isabella replied. "You were moving your lips silently." "I understand," Lynch replied. Isabella laughed and asked, "What do you understand?" But David didn't explain anything, leaving her puzzled. There wasn't a newspaper in America that didn't pay attention to this strange couple. Lynch's every gesture and every word was scrutinized and interpreted as a performance. Sometimes Isabella felt like she was going crazy from the constant pressure and publicity. Work on Blue Velvet was completed, bringing resounding success both to the film and to Isabella as an actress. After filming ended, Isabella was freed from her nightmares, as if she had been liberated from an oppressive atmosphere. The little white dog Lynch had given her now simply gathered dust on the dressing table, having lost its mystical meaning. Now Isabella could say with a clear conscience that she had achieved almost as much success in her acting career as her mother, working with the great Rossellini. In her book, A Few Words About Myself, Isabella writes that today's 30-somethings are unlikely to know about Ingrid Bergman and know Isabella Rossellini not as the daughter of a cinema classic, about whom they also know little, but as David Lynch's actress, emphasizing his enormous influence on her career. Unexpectedly, Lynch declared that they needed to communicate with voices. "Do you hear voices?" he pressed her. "I'm not talking about illness, but about premonition." Isabella assured him that she had clearly heard her mother's voice once after her death. It was during her time as a television journalist, when the young Isabella was interviewing Clint Eastwood, She expected Clint to talk about violence in his films and prepared a difficult question. But Eastwood was brief. There is no violence in his films. And he fell silent. Isabella didn't know what else to ask to fill the awkward pause. And at that moment, her mother's mocking voice sounded nearby. Always think about possible answers to your own questions, which became an important lesson for Isabella. David always had a multitude of similar stories, only they were all much scarier, filled with elements of horror and mysticism. If he didn't love women so much, he would probably have become a pagan sorcerer, Isabella Rossellini once said, accurately characterizing his deep connection to mysticism and his appeal to women. She constantly moved her fluffy little dog, a gift from Lynch, from place to place, as if trying to tame it. "I'm training her so she won't run away," she explained to David, perhaps subconsciously hinting at her own fears about his disappearance from her life. She spoke more and more insistently about having a child, about her desire to start a family. Lynch was categorically against it. He was afraid to have children because, as a result of experiments with psychedelic drugs, his first child was born with a physical defect. This story frightened Isabella as well. Lynch, trying to distract her, promised to give her a dress with a fake silicone belly so that people would think Isabella was pregnant. "What if I wear it for a year instead of 9 months?" she asked, testing the seriousness of his intentions. Lynch just shrugged, giving no clear answer. Meanwhile, their strange games of candid storytelling had run their course. Lynch was no longer interested in them, and his creative energy was seeking new sources of inspiration. The newspapers continued to insistently suggest to the new Juliet that her Romeo was a man with unhealthy fantasies, emphasizing the madness of their relationship. Isabella, tired of publicity and strangeness, wanted to change her line of work. She seriously considered focusing on writing, starting work on a memoir to make sense of her unique experience. One day, returning from shopping, Isabella noticed the white dog again in the courtyard, the same one she had encountered when leaving the restaurant. She saw this as a bad omen, a sign of impending change. The dog looked at her, turned away, and walked off. Isabella fainted, shaken by this mystical event. Journalists, of course, did not miss the opportunity to sensationalize the story, further mystifying their tale. A couple of days later, Isabella was horrified to discover that her white, fluffy dog, a gift from Lynch, had disappeared. Isabella rushed to David with questions, but he only grunted discontentedly and asked her to leave him alone, ignoring her concern. The next day, Isabella overheard a conversation between two young women who were working part-time as cleaners in the studio. "It's impossible to clean up," one of them grumbled. "Mr. Lynch feeds her anywhere, and the food is so greasy. It's so easy to slip on it." "Does Mr. Lynch have a dog?" Isabella asked, sensing something was wrong. "Yes, everyone knows that. Mr. Lynch keeps a big white dog at the studio. It's always with him. But for some reason, it hasn't been around for the last 5 days." "Didn't you know that, ma'am?" Isabella didn't answer, shocked by what she had heard, and hurried to the exit. While Lynch was away, she quickly gathered her things in their shared home, called a taxi, and left. Forever. When the car started moving, she turned around and thought she saw David standing on the doorstep of their house, as if nothing had happened, covering his face with his hands and looking at her through his fingers, as if watching another scene from his movie. It was the end of their mysterious romance, which left behind only questions and legends.